Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jalen if you're new here, and today I'm just going to go over some recent books that I've read, give you some mini reviews on those, share some books that I've recently purchased on the TBR for the rest of April, or I guess of like the next week, and then just go from there. So April, I've been reading a lot of books this month, and this month has been like the month of the audiobook. I'm currently 100% obsessed with listening to an audiobook while I'm reading the same book. So I've been trying to use like Libby and this app called Scribd, which has a lot of audiobooks on there that are already on my TBR, to try to find books that I want to read and then listen to them while I'm reading, because I find that it helps me stay focused, and I like hearing someone read to me. It just is like nice and pleasing and relaxing, and I'm just digging it. I don't know why that's like a new development for me. Yeah, I think what really started that was Middlemarch. Reading that book with the narrator in my ears was very helpful, and now I just like it. Sitting with a narrator for like 30 plus hours was a lot. So yeah, it's my new thing, is audiobooks. And so I guess I'll start with books that I've recently read. And the most recent one is The Pisces by Melissa Broder. I love Melissa Broder, and I hadn't read this book yet somehow. I read Milk Fed and her essay collection So Sad Today, like over a year ago, I want to say, and I loved them so much. And then from there, I discovered that she runs the Twitter account called So Sad Today, which is quite popular. And I remember seeing that back in like college and then never knowing who was behind it, and then finding out that it's Melissa Broder. I was like mind blown. But I also listened to her podcast called Eating Alone in My Car, in which she eats alone in her car with a snack, and she just talks to herself and thinks about many of the musings that are contained within her novels. And so it's kind of a fun complimentary treat to be able to listen to her kind of go over what she thinks about, her very deep and dark thoughts about life, and filling the existential hole inside of her, and her just kind of processing her recent trauma of losing her dad, all of that. And so it was interesting reading this book after having already read Milk Fed, listened to that podcast religiously. It was just really fun, and this book is wild. I'm going to give full thoughts like in my end of month wrap up, but this book is, y'all have been talking about this book for a while. Many people I know have read this book. I'm very late to the party, but this is essentially like literary merman erotica about existential dread, trying to find purpose in one's own life through other people, and how that can maybe not happen, and how to be okay with yourself without someone else around you, manifesting love, and mermaid sex. It was a weird one, but I loved it so much. Very smart. And I want to read more fiction that's just like fun and isn't afraid to be weird, but not like pretentious or annoying. This book is very straightforward and just embraces its weirdness, but it's very like effortlessly told. And I also did the audiobook with this one, and it's narrated by Melissa Broder, and it was incredible. I love her voice, and I'm so used to listening to her in the podcast, so it was like a natural thing for me to listen to. So love that. I devoured it in like a day and a half. So good. And then actually from there, this goes into a book that I just picked up like an hour ago when I was driving. So as I've discovered that I want to get more into like audiobooks and stuff, I realized that I have so many credits that I stacked up on Audible, which I know, don't cancel me. But I had credits from before, and I guess like I have a membership that was like renewing, but I couldn't get rid of the membership because it would get rid of my credits, and I don't want to waste the credits. So I've been just like letting it sit there. But I want to completely switch to Libro FM. I did an audio test of Audible versus Libro FM, and it is night and day. My jaw dropped, and I was livid because I listened to Middlemarch using one of these credits on Audible, and then I tested that same audiobook on Libro FM, and it sounds like I want to cry because I wasted so much time listening to the shittier version of the audio. Like, I'm so mad. But essentially, I have like a couple credits left I'm trying to get rid of, and so I was looking up different audiobooks, and I happened to look up Clarice Lispector audiobooks, and so fucking weird that I found The Hour of the Star. I have it here. I found The Hour of the Star, like her most famous book, I think. I think it's her last book as well. It's narrated by Melissa Broder. Like, what? And it's only available on Audible. So I just happened to be finishing this book, looking for new audiobooks, happened to think of Clarice Lispector, and saw Melissa Broder narrates this audiobook. And so I was like, yeah, purchasing it. So I wasn't ready to be done with Melissa Broder, so I picked up The Hour of the Star in audio, and will finally read this slim little book. So far, it's very weird and kind of Broder-ish in terms of its like existential thinkiness that I really like, but it's also, I'm excited to read it while I listen because it's a little like not all over the place, but it's smart, I think. So I'm gonna have to pay attention to it and kind of slow down and really make sure I get into the flow of this book. But I hear she's incredible, and I really want to read another book of hers that I picked up from the library that I have here called The Passion According to G.H. I guess this book is about a woman who kills a insect. I can't even say the word. It's my biggest fear, so I don't even want to say it. She kills a bug of some sort, and then she essentially thinks about it for the rest of the book. She's giving depressed woman moving vibes, and I'm excited for it. So hope to get into the Spectre. Oh, and then aside from that, random, when I was doing my audiobook searching that I mentioned, I saw Brandon Taylor tweet about Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, and I really have been wanting to read this book as like my next big book. I wanted to get into Russian literature. This book, Brandon Taylor said, is basically like the best book ever written. So, obviously I want to read it. And I've been thinking about picking this up for the last couple months, but I was reading Middlemarch, and so I was like, maybe this will be my next one. But also, I like semi-committed. Well, I told myself I was going to read the International Booker shortlist, and that has the books of Jacob on it, and it has Tomb of Sand, 2 really huge books. But I'm not really in the mood for either of them right now, and I really want to read this. So I'm just like, do I eventually read the shortlist? I own both of those books. I'm going to read them at some point. But I really want to read this, I think. I don't know. We'll see. And then aside from that, also on the TBR. So actually, I wanted to announce something here. I'll probably do a separate announcement too. But a part of my podcast video discussion series that I started on my channel recently, I'm doing the bar and the book club, essentially. So in the last week of every month, I'm going to have a live discussion with a guest to kind of replace one episode of that series, to kind of have more interaction and knock some more books off of my TBR and hopefully yours as well. And so every other month I'm going to switch between frontlist and backlist, and on the first of every month on my Instagram stories I'm going to share the 4 books that I am choosing from, why I picked them, and then have you all vote on which book you want to read by the end of the month, and then I'll have a live discussion. And then if you can't join the live discussion, it'll be saved there, so you can always go back and watch it whenever you feel like reading the book, if you do. So all that to say, that's starting this month on April 26th. That's a Tuesday. And I'm having Katie Books. He is the Booker boy. And we're reading Elena Knows by Claudia Pinheiro, translated by Frances Riddle. This one just made the International Booker shortlist. And so for the first episode, I wanted to have Katie come on, and he's a blast to have, and I think it'll be a really fun discussion. But I know it's short notice, but this book is less than 150 pages. So it's like a 1 or 2 sittinger, at least for me. And yeah, I've seen some hella crazy praise for this book. People said it's the one to win. This book is essentially about a woman who finds her daughter hanging in a church. And I guess Elena knows that her daughter did not commit suicide and that someone must be involved. And so I guess this book starts as a sort of like mystery crime novel, but it kind of subverts your expectations, I think. I guess it gets kind of meta and smart by the end of it and makes you question your own assumptions about things, about disability. It sounds good. So this is what we're reading, April 26th with Katie Books, live. It's going to be at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. I believe UK time. So that's coming soon. So hurry, grab a copy, read it, come join us in the chat. We'll be sharing, comments and stuff on the screen. But that'll be coming every month. So next month will be backlist. I have to look through my backlist stacks and figure out what books I want to pick for my own personal shortlist, and then you all vote, and then we read it. Questions, leave them below. But that should be it. And then the guest will be a surprise, usually whoever is willing to come on the channel. Hopefully I get people to come on, so we'll see. Fingers crossed. But anyway, so that is currently the state of like immediate TBR, what I'm currently reading, what I recently finished, tangent. But then I'll also go into some recent reads and give you some mini reviews. And then I'll leave you with your Friday. So, crap. There's a book, my camera's on top of a stack of books. I'm also reading Cursed Bunny by Bora Chung, translated by Anton Her. And I thought I was going to love this book, but I must say, it's kind of hitting mid for me. Don't hate it, don't love it. The stories are very weird, and they're like fun to read in the moment, but they're very just like fleeting and a little, there's not doing much for me. We'll see. I've only read 2 stories so far, so maybe it'll change. But on another note, a book that I recently read that's also short stories that I absolutely love. It's An Exciting and Vivid Inner Life by Paul Dalla Rosa. This book comes out in the UK on June 2nd, 2022. So it's not going to be out in the US yet. However, you can order this book from Blackwell's. I saw it's like $15 on there, hardcover, shipping in June. Do it. This is a collection of short stories that, to sell it to you very simply, this is Moshfegh, but make it gay. And so good. Like, I was floored reading this collection. I became friends with Paul on Instagram. I'd read one of his stories before, and I saw him talking about Amy Bairdale, her short story collection. She's Atocha Moshfegh's best friend, or like a close friend, and she wrote Atocha Moshfegh's favorite story collection. So I was reading that collection, looked up reviews of the collection, and found Paul talking about one of the stories in there, found one of his stories, followed him on Instagram. Then he was publishing this book. We were chatting about Moshfegh and stuff, and then his publisher, through him, offered to send me a copy. And so anyways, I'll just say I got a copy of this. That's why I got it, being in the US. But instant new favorite story collection. It's so fucking good. It's like, I remember reading Moshfegh, and I'm like, I wish someone would write this, but make it gay. Like, I want like gay depression, like thinky, existential, navigating the world with sex and, you know, thinking poor things, being generally unlikable. I want that. I want Moshfegh's staples, but I want it gay. And this is it. So anyways, yeah, I'll go into more stories in my end of month wrap up, but I can say, if you love the depressed woman moving style of Moshfegh, but you want it to be queer, this is it. New instant favorite of mine. It's going right up in the top of like my favorite short story collections, along with Held a Wolf by the Ears, Daddy by Emma Cline. Similar vibes, but queer, and I'm digging it. Next up, I read Checkout 19 by Claire Louise Bennett. This is one that I had read the first 2 chapters and took a little break from it, like unintentionally. I was reading too many things, and then I took a break. But this book is all about, this is weird as hell, I don't even know how to summarize it. It's essentially about books and reading, and it's a piece of autofiction that's kind of one of the more like different and unique takes on autofiction that I've read in a while. It essentially looks at the practice of like reading and books and writing, but also it follows this narrator who essentially becomes a writer and reflects on her writing and the craft of it. But it's very like, I don't know if stream of consciousness is the right word, but it seems like through the writing, Claire Louise Bennett and this narrator is trying to like get a grasp on writing, like trying to constantly affirm herself through what she's doing. So she says like, so I'll just give you like an example of what this style of book is. So it says, later on, we often had a book with us. Later on, when we were a bit bigger at last, though still nowhere near as big as the rest of them, we brought over books with us. Oh, loads of books, and sat with them there in the grass by the tree. Just one book, in fact. Just one, that's right. Lots of books, one at a time. That's it, one at a time. So it kind of has this like floating sense of prose that was kind of interesting and fun to read, but I did kind of lose steam with this book in the last half of it. I was kind of just like, all right, the narrative here is kind of lacking for me. It's doing, I think it's trying to do a little bit more than it should, and I feel like there should have been a more like narrative cohesion here. But I do love the explorations here of like reading and what it means, and like why we consider books in a certain way, what it means to have books as items versus the actual text itself, the individual experience of reading and how it affects us personally and our personal growth, and how it's a very individualized experience for everyone, and how books, you know, through people thinking about them and like the classics that we have, how every person who comes to a book brings something new to it. And I love those ideas, but I think in a novel, I think the execution was kind of lacking there. So I don't know. This is a weird one that I would like to return to in like 10, 15 years and see if I have a different take on it, but didn't love it, kind of felt mid on it. But it wasn't a bad book by any means. It's just very weird, and I don't know, kind of conflicted about it. Next up, I read, actually this is in no particular order, but recently I read Body Work by Melissa Febos. This is essentially a very brief little book about the craft of personal narrative. So this isn't really a like training manual on how to write personal narrative and memoir, but this is Melissa Febos looking at her own reflections on personal narrative and how she has become the writer that she is, and how she finds that personal narrative is so necessary and difficult to do for healing and getting past trauma, and the benefits of revision and how she teaches her students to kind of adopt those things. So there's 4 essays here. One that basically says that navel gazing is something that writers should do, and how it's often looked down upon for memoir to be navel gazy, but she says no, that's like the entire point of memoir, and how we should look to ourselves to write further. There's an essay called Mindfuck that's all about writing about sex and how to do that well. There's one about confession, and another one about writing about other people that you know in real life and kind of the morality and ethics behind writing about other people. So I'm not a writer, but I really loved reading this in terms of how I think about, namely, autofiction. I read a lot of autofiction, as you might know. But this book also makes me want to pick up more memoir. It was a really good read, really well written. Also did this one on audio as well. It's on Scribd if you're interested. Another one that's on Scribd, that if you're interested, is Leaving the Atocha Station by Ben Lerner. This book absolutely slapped. And this book was actually referenced in my favorite book of 2021, Fake Accounts by Lauren Euler. And upon reading this, I realize that fake accounts and Leaving the Atocha Station are so in conversation with each other, it's wild. This follows a American poet from Kansas who is in Madrid on a fellowship, and he is trying to write poetry, essentially, but it's very depressed dude in Spain trying to figure out how to write a profound piece of art and whether there can be any profundity to be found in art. And so this book is very, very, very smart, has very long, crafty sentences, very thinky for this narrator, uses all of my favorite things about autofiction, using this kind of meta narration that I love, in which we follow a narrator who is trying to write a profound piece of art. And then this is also a book written by Ben Lerner, who essentially is also trying to write a piece of art about that. And so that's one of the things I really love about autofiction that kind of questions the form within it, is this sense of sort of like a meta critique on what autofiction does and what he's trying to do here, as he is himself a poet as well, and this is a foray into novel writing. And so it's just a really interesting blend of all of those things, but really liked it. Very much a conversation with Fake Accounts, and it was kind of cool to read another book that kind of hit that same sweet spot for me, but I do prefer Fake Accounts overall, but this is great too. Next, I read Acts of Service by Lillian Fishman. This book comes out May 3rd, and this book absolutely slaps too. I'm in like a good reading space lately, if you can't tell. I'm really digging a lot of stuff. Anyways, this book is all about a love triangle of sorts. So we follow a queer woman in New York. She's in her late 20s, I believe. And she is in a relationship with a woman. And one day she posts online nudes of herself, and she gets a message from someone. And she ends up meeting this person who is interested in her sexually. And so, long story short, she ends up cheating on her girlfriend with this couple. So she gets very sexually involved with them, and she kind of becomes their third, in a sense, in how they kind of use her for their own sexual gains. And so this book is all about sexual desire and power imbalances in relationships and the ethics and morality behind sex. This book has a ton of sex in it, but it's quite explicit, but I wouldn't say, I can see that this book is going to be quite divisive. I think kind of similar to the Pisces in terms of its use of sex to explore something deeper. I'm already going to be annoyed by the reviews of this. It's like, what the fuck was this book? Like, what? It's just like gratuitous sex. No, this book is very fucking smart, and I loved it so much. It's looking at how your selfhood is determined by subsuming yourself in other people and what that means for your self-identity. And it's kind of similar to the Pisces. When a person needs to kind of fill the hole with someone else, what does that do, and is that sustainable? And how does that kind of play out within a dynamic with multiple people? And the kind of duties that we're owed to other people, and how finding yourself and your own happiness through other people, how it affects them and yourself, and the kind of weird, messy gray areas that kind of ensue there. So smart. This book is going to be the moment this summer, I think, but I'm hoping we get some good analysis of it, in my opinion. I feel like it's going to be a lot of not great stuff on Goodreads about this one. Goodreads is going to be in shambles 100%, but one of my favorite books this year so far. It's fucking phenomenal. I'll leave it there. And last up, I have a book called Very Cold People by Sarah Manguso. This book was really interesting, but I don't have too many good thoughts on it, I guess. It is another piece of autofiction, I believe. This is one of those fragmentary style novels that I also did on audiobook, Trend. But it essentially looks at a young girl growing up in a fictional town in Massachusetts. And this book, I don't want to spoil too much about it, but it essentially is looking at depravity in human beings and reckoning with childhood trauma and the kind of unspokenness of trauma in childhood, and reflecting on how that appears in the mind of a child. And this book is very similar to me to the Copenhagen trilogy by Tove Ditlevsen, particularly Childhood, the first one in that trilogy. Very, very similar vibes here in terms of how the narrator, through like an autofictional lens, kind of thinks about and processes and writes on the page about childhood, trauma, and poverty, and familial dynamics and abuse, how this town is kind of ridden with very cold people and a child's lens on that. I really love that, but I will say this book hasn't stayed with me too much, and I don't really know why. I read it very quickly. It's a very short little book, but it's very, clean, precise prose that I like in this kind of style of novel. It was good. I don't really have any critiques of it, but it wasn't a new favorite, but I recommend it. Anyways, I feel like I talked way more about those books than I should have. I said I was going to give quick little reviews, but I'm feeling chatty. Whatever. Mid-month wrap-up. We love. I just stopped recording, but I realized I had 2 books I just picked up that I want to share with you. The first one is David Shields' The Very Last Interview. This is a small little New York Review of Books book that essentially, I guess, is a compilation of just questions that David Shields has received in interviews throughout his career, and he puts them all within one book and tries to kind of establish a through line and tell a story through the interview questions. And so I wanted to read this because now that I'm interviewing authors, I'm wondering what this book is going to say about that and being an author and being asked about your work. It also has a Sheila Heti blurb that says very, very funny. So, I love Sheila Heti, and quick little read, but I'm curious to see what this one's all about. So yeah, there's that one. And then also a book that I stumbled upon, I think on a 2022 anticipated release list or something. It's called Woman Eating by Claire Coda. And essentially, I forget what this one's about in full, but essentially it's about a woman who is a vampire, I guess, and it's all about female hunger. And in the Ruth Ozeki blurb, she says, Claire Coda takes the vampire trope and makes it her own in a way that feels fresh and original. Serious issues of race, disability, misogyny, body image, sexual abuse are handled with subtlety, insight, and a lightness of touch. In the novel is ridiculously suspenseful. So I love a book that uses enticing subject matter, such as a vampire, and actually explores some complex things in it, a la Melissa Broder. So we'll see. I grew up loving vampire shit, so I'm excited to read vampire shit again. So we'll see how this one goes. Yeah, let me know how your reading what's going. If you have any feedback on the book club, any guests you'd like to see, any books that you want me to consider for future lists that you can choose from, any books that you really think would be good for discussion, let me know. Let's chat. And I hope to see you at the live discussion on the 26th. I think it's going to be a really good discussion. I'm excited about it. All right, anyways, I will catch you all in the next one. Cheers.